In on the pregame show. Little Cuse basketball, a little matinee on this holiday. Happy New Year's Eve to everyone. Almost New Year, almost 2025. And let's see if the Orange can get a win going into the 2025 calendar portion of the schedule. ACC games the rest of the way. We have made it to conference play fully. The Cuse did play one early season ACC game, remember, at Notre Dame. So this is ACC game number 2 for the Orange. It is game number 3 in conference play for Wake Forest, a team that was picked to finish 3rd in the ACC, and they have underachieved for their standards to this point in the season. So a very winnable game here at home today for the Orange. Should be a close game, and we'll get you ready for it with all the details on Wake, a full scatter report on them, as we have our pregame show for the next hour or so, brought to you by Burdick Ford and Burdick Toyota. If you'd like, you can call in, drop your thoughts if you're driving into the game. Hopefully it should be a good turnout inside the Dome this afternoon, a 2 p.m. tip on this New Year's Eve day. And the phone number to call in is 315-437-7644. If you have thoughts, if you have a prediction, if you have a key to the game, anything of the like, you can chime in. That is 4ESPN44 is the phone number to call here on the Burdick Toyota, Burdick Ford pregame show. We will be back after the game as well here on ESPN Syracuse and on QSportsTalk.com. We're always on QSportsTalk.com as well. You can hop in the chat, fire away with questions. I'll answer your questions over the commercial breaks on the radio side of things. You do not get breaks on the Twitch stream or on YouTube, which is where we are streaming the show, where you can watch, as always, on QSportsTalk.com or the QSportsTalk YouTube page. So Syracuse, Wake Forest, that's the matchup. And look, this is a really big stretch of games here starting for the Orange, because we know it has been a tough stretch, tough start to the season, tough almost half of the season at this point. It's been a lot of bad things, honestly, for Syracuse to this point. But you look at the start of this ACC schedule, and the ACC's had a tough start as well. And the benefit of that is Syracuse could stack some wins here early on in conference play. A very favorable start to their ACC schedule. We mentioned they're 0-1 already, a tough loss at Notre Dame in the middle of December. You've got Wake Forest, a team that, like I said, was projected to be borderline top 25. They were receiving votes in the AP poll. A lot of college basketball pundits had them as maybe even the second best team in the conference going into the year. So this is a talented Wake Forest roster led by Hunter Salas, who was an all-ACC first-teamer last year, thought about the NBA draft, returned to Wake. He actually was kind of struggling through the first 10 games or so of the season for the Demon Deacons, but he has really caught fire in the last 2 games. And Wake enters here at 9-4 on the season, but kind of a meh non-conference for the Demon Deacons. They're 1-1 in league play. They took down BC at home in a game they won by 8 points, nothing too special. Then BC's not good at all, so that was kind of like you're expected to win that one at home. You did it. And then they had a loss on the road last time out on December 21st. So both teams coming off a little bit of a break. The Orange, of course, did play Bucknell the other day, though. Wake has had a 10-day break here and did not play in a game over last weekend. So they've had some time to come back on campus after a holiday break and really scout this Syracuse team. And they did play Clemson on the 21st, lost that game at Clemson, which is, as far as ACC games go, that is probably one of the toughest games you'll see this year, is a road trip to Clemson. They have been in and out of the top 25 and been a pretty solid team. So that's kind of the lay of the land for Wake Forest. You look at the start of this ACC schedule for Syracuse, and according to KenPom, the Orange are projected to win 4 of their next 6 games, all in conference play the rest of the way, of course, including this one. They're slim favorites on KenPom and Bart Torvik and the computer metrics for this game because of the home court advantage and things like that. By the way, did you hear Kyan Anthony and Carmelo Anthony are coming to the game? That's another thing. Another wrinkle with this game. Kyan and Melo, I'm sure, will be courtside have to imagine right next to the orange bench there and the former Adam Weitzman seats, I would imagine. So that'll be cool. That'll at least get the fans going regardless of the outcome. When Melo walks in, I'm sure there will be a buzz in the Dome, and not someone that has been back a ton. I know a couple years ago with Jim Boeheim's final day and honoring the 2003 team for that final home game. I believe that game was against Wake Forest, actually, too, if I'm remembering correctly. But anyway, Melo and his son, who, of course, is committed to come to Syracuse, Kyan Anthony, will be in attendance. Reports where they were going to make the trip at least a couple weeks ago. So it seems like that is still the case for today. So that is something to look forward to. If you're going to the game, you should be able to see Melo and Kyan Anthony. But for the next 6, the Orange are favored on KenPom to win these games. They go to Florida State after this. That's actually one of the games that they are not projected to win because it is a road game. The Vegas spread favors Wake Forest a little bit. Wake does have a solid win this year, something Syracuse cannot claim. The Demon Deacons won a quad 1 game, neutral site. I say neutral with air quotes because it was in Greensboro, which is basically a home game for them. It's probably, 30, 45 minutes from Winston-Salem. So Greensboro is where they played Michigan, a good Michigan team. So props to them. That was a good win and a better win than Syracuse has on their resume for sure. The Orange are still looking for their first Power Conference win of the year. Wake also beat Minnesota and then BC in conference play. So they have in total 3 Power Conference victories of their 9 wins to this point. So that Michigan win, a 2-point win, is technically a quad 1 win because it was technically a neutral site game. Syracuse at 6-6. Somehow for Wake, this is a quad 3 game, and there's going to be a lot of those in ACC play, but not really any point in talking about the quads and the net and things like that. I just say all that to say that these are 2 pretty similar teams when you look at metrics across the board that rank all the college basketball teams in Division I. Wake Forest is slightly better in most of those metrics and pretty much all of those metrics than Syracuse, but Syracuse is the home team here, and we saw some things in the last game against Bucknell. I'm not going to get up here and say that was the performance we were all waiting for. I think everyone's mindset after that Bucknell game was kind of like, they were good enough. They won. It's better than losing the game. It was a 75-63 win last time out. I believe that was back on Saturday, against Bucknell. Bucknell's not a good team, and they just sort of hung around more than you would like in the second half. There were some signs of three-point shooting improvement for Syracuse in the first half. They were 6 for 12 in that game from beyond the arc in the first half. And then they made 1 3 in the second half. But Coach Autry said, remember, after the Maryland game, I'm going to make some changes. We have to make some changes. He called the Maryland loss, that tough loss at Brooklyn, the worst loss of his tenure as the Syracuse head coach to date, and was very vocal about how he was not pleased with his team's effort. So one of those changes he made and the coaching staff made, and they worked on it in practice leading into that Bucknell game, is we saw some full court pressure, which I'm very curious to see now. Is that something they stick with going forward? Against a Bucknell team, they sped them up. They forced some turnovers. The Orange had 13 steals in that game, which is a number that isn't crazy, but for this year's Syracuse team, they are not producing steals. They're near the bottom of the Division I ranks in steals per game. So 13 was their best output in terms of steals in an individual game since the first game of the season. So that was good to see. I did like the press personally. I thought it was a good switch. I think it sort of energized the team in a way. It got everyone a little bit more intense, and it got just better offensive flow because they were able to get in transition. Remember, Red in the preseason talked so much about how he wants this team to get up and down. He wants their tempo to be up and down the floor. Now, Wake Forest under Steve Forbes has typically been that type of team. Typically, they have gone up and down. They have good shooters, and they're an offensive-minded team. Interestingly enough, they went in the portal. They got some physical bigs. They sort of changed their style a little bit this year. And like Syracuse, they have not made a thing from the outside. This is literally a matchup of the two worst three-point shooting teams in Power Conference college basketball this year. Wake is actually somehow shooting worse than Syracuse from three. They're shooting 26.5% from three. That is near the 350s out of 360-something Division I college basketball teams. So this is a matchup of the two worst Power Conference three-point shooting field goal percentage teams to this point in the season. And this is the first time under Steve Forbes, now in his fifth year at Wake Forest, that when you look at how Ken Pom sizes up Wake Forest's offensive efficiency and their defensive efficiency, it has actually been a defensive-led team this year for Wake. They are holding opponents to 38% from the floor, 22nd in the nation. So this is a more defensive-minded group. It'll be interesting to see if the Orange stick with that press, which we did see in sort of full force. We saw it a little bit against Maryland when things got out of hand, and that makes sense. You go to it then. But they went in with a game plan. Hey, we're going to press Bucknell. This is going to be a part of our defensive strategy. Here's what Adrian Autry said post-game about what he thought of that change to incorporate a little bit more press on defense.
You know, obviously, when your team is not playing the way you want them to play, you got to look at everything, and I had a lot of time after that Maryland game to kind of reassess and think about some things. And even in that defeat, I seen some things, you know, especially with the press, that I said, this might be something that we might need to, explore more. And that's what, and that's what I thought would help us get going, and I thought it did. We came back from break, and we really worked on it a lot. So, that's the change. Everybody always thinks it's like personnel, or it's everything. You got to look at everything when it's not going that way. I thought Lucas, our bench gave us a good lift. I think Lucas has been really good for us the last, two or three games.
Yeah, it was good to see Lucas Taylor hit some shots in the first half, at least. He made his first three-pointers. First three-pointers. That's what I wanted to say. In the Bucknell game, he was 3 for 3 in the first half, which was good to see. But, when you go to this lineup where it's Lucas Taylor, Kyle Cuff, Jaquan Carlos, I wonder, you can get away with that against Bucknell offensively. That's not a lot of scoring for your backcourt. That's the only concern. Can you get away with that against a very solid Wake Forest defensive team? Will we see a lot of that lineup? Kyle Cuff had a season-high 24 minutes. Lucas Taylor played 24 minutes. Carlos, basically, for the second straight game, played the entirety of the game the other day. We know they are without J.J. Starling, and hearing some good reports on him that we can discuss as we continue with the pregame show. But that lineup, are you going to have enough scoring punch? I mean, think about that. Those three backcourt guys I just named, Taylor, Carlos, and Cuff. Can any one of those three get you 20 points in a game? Like, if everything clicks, what is their highest scoring? I think Carlos had 15 in a game this year, and I'm not knocking Carlos because he is fitting his role way more in the last 5-6 games than he has been. So that's good to see. That's been progress. He is a ball handler you can trust against some pressure as he brings it up to an extent. I mean, he's the best option they have right now. But that's my concern, is that backcourt going to have enough scoring punch today if they do go more towards that lineup? And the other thing, on the note of the press, you start to dive into Wake Forest. Is this the team that you want to press? Bucknell, it kind of made sense to press them. What about Wake? Well, they are turning the ball over a fair amount to this point. 12.5 turnovers per game. That puts them 15th in the ACC, 223rd in the nation overall in turnovers per game. The other thing that is good from a standpoint of should Syracuse press them, Wake is not a deep team. They hardly use their bench. It's been that way under Steve Forbes going back the last couple years. So they don't use their bench hardly at all. And right now, they're actually 325th in the nation in bench minutes used. Syracuse is 112th. Syracuse does have a deeper team. So that'll be interesting. It seems like Wake has some things that they lend themselves to. Maybe you could press them. And maybe that is a strategy that the Orange stick with here as they continue into ACC play. Again, 2 p.m. tip today against Wake Forest. So let's go to the phone lines here, and let's check in with our guy, Scooter, who is first up on the Burdick Ford and Burdick Toyota pregame show. Scooter, what's on your mind?
Yeah, it's a big day for me at SU today, and then we got a little at Boise tonight. We'll find out if the. So, but first of all, is Wake Forest still have that big guy from Gonzaga?
They
Reed,
do.
still on the
Afton
team?
Reed, yeah. He came in halfway point of last year, right? I think it was halfway,
He came with Salas, and I still can't believe you left a Sweet 16 team every year to Wake Forest. There'd be a little NIL money involved in that. And
I guess so.
And it had to be. I mean, it's Wake Forest. It's not going anywhere. The reason why I'm asking is two things. First of all, I want to see if Lampkin going against somebody his own size and weight. I mean, he backed down Bucknell, but come on. I mean, it's kind of the size wise. I mean, it's like me backing down Jordan. I mean, it's to me, I want to see that if that's going to be part of the game plan because we're going to get sizes. The press, I've been harping on that for years. If you have to manufacture points, the press at least speeds up the other team maybe a little faster than they want to play. And I think they had 20 points off turnovers, and they scored 75.
Yep, 75. Yeah.
So 20 points actually came off turnovers, which basically isn't your half-court offense normally. So I always wanted them, and they've always had the excuse of no bench. Well, to me, you play 4-minute games. Okay, every 4 minutes is going to be a 4-minute timeout, and now we got length, we got the bench, and I saw it against Maryland. They just seem to be a little bit energy level, and that would be interesting to see if they continue this. And Syracuse is going to play high scoring games. That's the way they are. I mean, they're not going to win too many 52-50 games.
Right.
So
I think this one could be a little lower scoring just because Wake plays that style. And I agree with you. I think it's a good time to press also because Wake is a good defense. So you limit your half-court offense. If you're actually able to get some transition points, that might be your best offense in a game against a very solid defensive team that is Wake Forest. The only thing is, I wonder, the press was okay. Some of it was just kind of easy to pass around, though, from my vantage point at least. And then, I mean, the upside is by the time Bucknell crossed the half-court line, then they only had 12, 13 on the shot clock sometimes, which is better. And they can't get into their slower offensive sets necessarily. But, I think Wake might be able to slice up the press a little bit more than Bucknell. So we'll see how effective the press is. That'll be interesting.
Well, the interesting part is if you go over the last, and this goes into Coach Boeheim's era too, not just Autry. Take a look at the first 4 minutes. Is Syracuse actually ahead or behind, and B, how many points they scored in the first 4 minutes? It just seems that we always come out a little flat.
Yeah.
I always thought that was because of the zone. We were standing around. We're not building up a sweat. And at least the press gets you going. And to me, I just like up-tempo teams and basically hopefully you get the other team tired too, hopefully, because like you said, they got to work to get the ball up. And all of a sudden they got 15 seconds maybe to get into their offense. So they might be rushing shots. But like I said, I'm more interested to see how Lampkin does against Reed, because unless Reed's lost a lot of weight, he was
he's
about
still
a 7-footer, but about 280 with Gonzaga, and he was a developing player, and we'll see what happens. But we'll see what happens. Should be a fun time, and hopefully I'm popping champagne at midnight with Boise, okay?
Yeah, there you go. Good luck to your Broncos and Ashton Genty. We appreciate you hopping on, Scooter. And Efton Reed is still big. He also is foul trouble prone, so that'll be kind of a key for Syracuse today. He's a good shot blocker. He's a big part of why Wake Forest has been a very solid defensive team. Right now, Wake is 46th in the nation in defensive efficiency on KenPom. So maybe not expected to be this much of a defensive-minded team when they started the season, but they have not been able to hit shots nearly to the degree that I'm sure Wake Forest fans would have guessed, with 26.5% from beyond the arc being their three-point shooting percentage to this point in the season. But they do have a good defense. And Efton Reed, if he stays out of foul trouble, is a load down there and a tough guy to handle on the offensive end, and also a good shot blocker on the defensive end. So it'll be interesting to see how Eddie Lampkin matches up with him. We'll take our first time out here on the Burdick Ford Burdick Toyota pregame show. Hop on to QSportsTalk.com. If you are on the go, you can always chat away during the breaks on QSportsTalk.com. And if you have a comment as you're making your way into the game today, or if you're watching at home and you have a comment as well, 315-437-6666. 7644. For ESPN 44 is the phone number to call. Happy early New Year to everyone out there, and we'll be right back on QSportsTalk.com and ESPN Radio. Already got a Scooter call. What's up, chat? What's up, Gavendo? How are we doing? Matt Pork. Yeah, Matt is back on the radio call today. Uh-huh. You and me against the two worst players on the team. I still think we'd lose. Yeah. We'd probably get like one basket, like 2 points. Mike is wondering if it was 15-0 to start. Here, you can explain.
All right, so me and Tim, we choose any two players off Syracuse, and we play a game to 20.
So we're going to choose two walk-ons. I mean, I don't even know why you're...
if you don't want to challenge.
I mean, I don't think I can guard Donnie Freeman, so
we
I'm going
to choose the first two. We played at 20, and we get a 15-point lead. I think we could... Oh, because, okay, if we're playing ones and twos, they got to score a lot. Therefore, I think we could get at least 3 prayers up in the amount of time it takes them to 20. I think we'd lose 20-18. And if we're playing twos, by the twos and threes, if one of us gets hot, all we need is like 2 baskets.
Yeah, Govindo says you could play Lobdell. Yeah, we would have a size advantage on him. He'd be one of the few.
If we're going with a size advantage, that's all I need, dude. I'm wiry.
Noah Lobdell is probably one of the worst walk-ons we've had in terms of skill level.
My Euro, it's like a running back.
We all know why he's on the team.
It's like a running back, Tim. You get the ball, put it under, quick, left, right, left, however you want to do. Boom, in there. I'm in there like swimwear, baby.
I like your confidence. Maybe you'd luck into a basket. I don't know.
I think we could.
I agree, sir. I think we would maybe not score.
No,
even against walk-ons, those guys are good.
Thing, we're definitely going to score because I have faith that by the time it takes them to get 20, one of us will get lucky enough to make a shot. You know what I mean?
Maybe like the ball deflects right to us. Or
listen, dude.
I mean, I guess against walk-ons we could score a bucket, but
I'm
would not
telling you, even against
win.
Non-walk-ons, I think we got a chance to get one. Just one. That's all I'm saying. You don't think one of us could throw up a prayer?
You're underestimating like how good college
I'm not. I'm not at all.
are.
They would destroy me. But I think one of us could get 1 30-footer up there. Just throwing up a prayer, 1 basket.
All right. I mean, maybe. That was your philosophy with the field goal kick, right? Just maybe you get lucky.
No, my philosophy with the field goal kick was there's no way I was going to make it. I hadn't made it in 10 years. I hadn't kicked a football in 10 years. And the only time I did was once.
Yeah.
I had no faith.
I don't know. Those guys are just, even the walk-ons, they're practicing every day. They're good. A lot better than me, that's for sure. Hildreth is a good player. Super Cat. I like him.
Dude, you're making 1 basket. Have ye faith. You little faith in one side.
I've never even seen you play basketball, so now maybe I'm underestimating you. I have not been to Lumpy's restaurant. I don't know what that is. Is that a nickname or the kick? Yeah. How are we feeling, Chad? Is this a bounce back? I say that after a win, but you know what I mean. Is this finally a good game? I think I'm still going to have to side with the Demon Deacons. Just don't think they've played nearly as good as they are at this point in the year. Is this a winnable game? Yes. That's not what I asked. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, who knows? Who knows with this team?
This is the Burdick Ford and Burdick Toyota pregame show.
Welcome back in on the pregame show. 2 p.m. tip this afternoon. Hopefully it's a solid crowd inside the Dome. The Orange really need a power conference win. Need something to kind of kickstart this season. Wake Forest also needs a win, though, too. They have not played up to their standards to this point in the season. Fifth year led by head coach Steve Forbes, and who I think is one of the best coaches probably in the ACC right now. I say that knowing that all these great ACC coaches are dropping like flies. Leonard Hamilton in the news this week. That'll be the next opponent for Syracuse on the road at Florida State Saturday. So that is the next game for the Cuse, January 4th, I believe. Yeah, January 4th, Saturday at Florida State. And if you missed it, Leonard Hamilton has been sued by 6 of his players. So that can't be great for team morale, team chemistry, although who knows? The details of that story are probably going to come out more in the next couple days, maybe. I don't even know. It's going to be an interesting one to follow. Both those Florida teams have some turmoil with Jim Larrañaga, Miami, off to a really tough start this year and him stepping down. So Leonard Hamilton, he's probably, if we're being honest, one more year and then he's done, whether it is this being a factor or just the fact that he's getting up there in age already. And, you know, he does look very young and he seems very healthy, which is great, but it feels like time is kind of wearing thin there for Leonard Hamilton and the Florida State experience. It wasn't that long ago that they were consistently in the top 25. Remember COVID, that they were probably one of the best teams in the nation that year, 2020, and then they got the banner on the ACC tournament banner, at least on the hardwood there, when no one was there to watch it as COVID was just happening in 2020. Since then, not a lot of great Florida State basketball under Leonard Hamilton. So we could be looking next year at Brad Brownell is the longest tenured ACC coach. 14 years, I think it is, for Brad Brownell, who was consistently on the hot seat for probably years 6 through 10 of his tenure, maybe 6 through 11. Clemson is good again, which makes sense because Clemson is good at football. Therefore, Clemson has good revenue. Therefore, Clemson has good NIL probably because you have to have good NIL to be good at football. And therefore, Clemson is able to pay players a little bit more than some other schools. That is the state of college athletics. That's where it's trending. SEC teams are thriving. That is not a coincidence. I believe at last look, the SEC had 10 of the top 25. Was never known as a basketball conference. Then NIL became a thing. It became very clear that it is just a game of money and how much are you willing to empty your pockets from donors, from boosters, and how much are you able to pay players is really where these players are going. And that was a lot of the comments from Jim Larrañaga, which some people thought weren't smart comments from him after a 4-8 start to the season. They lost to Mount St. Mary's. It may have come across as whiny a little bit and him not adapting to the times, but I don't know. I kind of can't really blame him because he went to the Final Four and then apparently 8 of his guys at the transfer portal. And it wasn't because they didn't like Miami, apparently. It was just they were being smart. Their agents were being smart. They were telling them, hey, your stock's pretty high. Free agency is a thing in college basketball now. Go where you can get the most money because some of these kids are maximizing what they have in their basketball career in college and trying to make the most money in college, knowing that NBA might not be that lucrative for them. So that's the state of college basketball, which isn't great, but we'll see. Maybe the Orange can turn things around this season. This is a big game today against Wake Forest. Certainly going to be one that we probably look back on and say, okay, if they win this game, that could be the start of something. You're projected to win 4 of your first 6 ACC games. A lot of these games in conference play we're going to go into with the same mindset we're going into this one. This is a winnable game for Syracuse. And the question is, can you start turning some of these winnable games into actual wins? Because the Orange are 0-6 against power conference competition this year. And we'll get into a full prediction on this game. I'll break down keys to the game as we progress. Want to dive more into what is Wake Forest and the full scouting report on the Demon Deacons. They are 9-4. They are 1-1 in ACC play. KenPom rates them as the 99th best team in the country. They started the year on KenPom projected to be the 44th best team, so they have dropped pretty considerably down to 99 in the latest KenPom rankings. Notable games to date for the Demon Deacons: a quad one win at a neutral site in Greensboro against a good Michigan team, 72-70, a 2-point victory over Michigan. The Wolverines check in at number 11 in the current KenPom ranking, so that is a quality win. They lost by 15 at Xavier, lost to Florida at a neutral site down in Florida in a holiday tournament by 17 to the Gators. That's a ranked Florida team, SEC team. They have some money. Florida 75, Wake 58 in that game. Lost to Texas A&M in a game where they could not score, 57-44. Texas A&M, SEC team, they have some money. So they have lost 3 games to pretty good power conference opponents to this point in the season. Also lost a game at Clemson, which is a good opponent, and we talked about how Clemson is one of the teams that is doing pretty well right now in the ACC. But Wake entered this year preseason 3rd in the Atlantic Coast Conference, and they have not been as good as expected. So why is that the case? Well, we talked about it last segment. They have not been able to shoot the 3. This is a matchup with the 2 worst power conference teams in 3-point field goal percentage. Syracuse 29%, Wake is 26.5%. Even if we round up 27% from 3 on a team that, a lot like Syracuse going into the year, you would have thought they have some shooters. So it has not worked out that way for Wake, which is interesting because, again, Steve Forbes' teams have been offensive-minded. He runs really good stuff on offense. It's often well-coached teams that he maximizes the guys he gets in the transfer portal year over year. Wake, again, this year had a lot of roster turnover, and that has been a consistent theme with them, is they take a guy who is an okay transfer portal guard. Maybe he bumps his way up from the mid-major level, and Steve Forbes develops him. The coaching staff there at Wake develops him. They have a good coaching staff there. So it's a little surprising to me that on paper, this was probably the most talented team Wake has had. They had a pretty talented team last year. They just did not win any games away from home, and that cost them. They did clobber the Orange last year at home in a game that was one to forget from a Syracuse standpoint. But it's surprising to me that Wake has struggled this much to this point in the season. I think they are a more talented roster than Syracuse, and I think Steve Forbes is a good coach. And typically he has done more with less, and this year he does have a good amount of talent, Hunter Salas being the key guy. Now, the Orange are catching Salas right as he is really heating up here. Hunter Salas went into the year, and some were predicting him to be an All-American type of talent and really take Wake Forest to the next level this year. And it just has not worked out that way to this point in the season, except for the last 2 games. So Hunter Salas is the guy to watch for sure. He scored 26 in the loss at Clemson. He scored 25 or more in the last 2 games, and he's starting to find his shooting stroke as well. Was a good 3-point shooter last year, 40%, and just has not been able to hit threes to that degree. To this point in the season was 25% from 3 through the first 11 games of the year, but has been finding his shooting touch in the last 2 games. Let's go back to the phone lines. We got Pat in Syracuse. Pat, what are your thoughts getting ready for this game against Wake?
Yeah, so look, right now the first season goal is make your conference tournament. I mean, that's where we're at right now. You know, we're going into 2025, and you know, if there was a gun to anybody's head, I don't think anybody can say that we right now, with the way the roster is constructed, there's a lot of teams in the league that are not good. But there's also not a lot of, cellar dwellers. Everybody's kind of decent, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions. Even Boston College, I think, has 1 decent win, Georgia Tech. The bottom line is, if you can't make your conference tournament, this season is an epic failure. But let's segue to why it's an epic failure. We have to give Autry a pass. He's our guy this year. He's our guy next year. That's what Cayenne wants, and that's what Carmelo wants. So if it's good enough for Cayenne Anthony and Carmelo Anthony, it has to be good enough for all Syracuse fans. So you know what? We need to get behind Red. He needs more support underneath him. I don't think the coaching staff is properly constructed underneath him, and I think he's learning some things on the fly. But you know what? He's our guy. And it's 2025, so new year, new motto. It's let's see what we can build on this year for next year because we're not dancing this year. I had an uncle over Christmas say, Pat, do you think we're going to make the NIT? I said, I don't even know if we're going to make our own conference tournament.
Yeah, to be clear, 15 of 18. Yeah. Some people are probably like, what? You always make – it's a new rule this year. 15 of the 18 teams make the ACC tournament. Just want to make sure anyone listening that was confused by that. But go on.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of our listeners get confused by pretty simple things. So, yeah, something new like that, absolutely worth clarifying. But the last piece is, look, if you had told me preseason we were getting nothing from JJ, negative production from Bell, and nothing from Westry, I would think we're winless. So, I mean, really, some of the other pieces are not designed to be your 2, 3, and 4.
Right.
They're designed to be your 4, 5, and 6. So that's the problem. I mean, you know, when Chance came on campus, you know, he was going to be the number one guy, period, point blank.
I don't know about that, but, I mean, he was a highly thought of recruit. I'm with you on that. Number one guy might be, I mean, he was coming off an injury. He was highly thought of in high school, for sure, yes.
If everything worked out with his, you know, he's had 2 injuries since coming on campus.
Yeah.
But if those didn't happen, and if you shook off the rust, his ceiling is higher than JJ's. Period. But not anymore.
I mean, he was definitely he still is in a way a high potential guy. It's frustrating. The injuries have delayed that even more than what we would have guessed. Right.
But I will say, comparing this year to last year, if we get JJ back and, you know, we start to see some of these guys settle in, I think we could, you know, be similar to last year because last year we had to play Justin Taylor, and I don't think Taylor would be playing this year, would he?
I don't think so, although is Lucas Taylor or Kyle Cuff really giving you way more than – I mean, it seems like we're heading in a direction where Taylor or Cuff are going to be playing – some pretty sizable minutes game in and game out, which that's because Chris Bell isn't himself, and we know that. So, yeah, I mean, Justin Taylor isn't doing much at James Madison. Like, he clearly was a problem last year, but you look at the backcourt that they used a ton the other day, and it's not like it's 3 guys that are way more talented than Justin Taylor, the Carlos Taylor and Cuff backcourt.
Well, I just think Carlos being labeled as the only ball handler is very problematic. You know, we don't have a guy at the 3 or 4 that we really trust with the ball.
Yeah.
I think Lampkin at the 5 is a good playmaker, but that's not enough help with the ball handling. So it's almost like some of the years
and you
when
missed JJ,
you know,
of course, yeah.
Yep. So hopefully JJ comes back. In terms of today, I think it's a close game. Unfortunately, I think we get out coached at the end, even though I'm all supporting Red, and you know now I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. But I really believe it. I really believe it's a close game, and I think there's some late game adjustments that win it for Wake Forest. And I hope I'm wrong, and I'll call the post game and admit it. But that's my prediction.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. So, all right, Pat, we got to hit a break, but I appreciate you checking in.
All right.
We'll talk post-game. That is Pat in Syracuse, who is supporting Red. He's all in on giving Red a pass this year, which, hey, I'm kind of with him. Pat, I didn't know if that was going to come out of his mouth. I haven't heard all of Pat's phone calls this year. So, anyway, that was surprising to the chat, maybe a little bit surprising to me, but good to hear. And we'll see how this game shakes out today. We are overdue for a break, 315-437-7644. If you'd like to chime in, we're back after this. QSportsTalk.com, ESPN Radio.
This is our...
Living that grape life, yeah. What did that stand for again? Jordan's going to hate me. What was it like? Someone, gratitude, respect? What was it? Grateful, maybe? Was that the G? Melo's not coming? Is that the word on the street? Govendo, what do you not like? I'm just curious. I'm not saying you're wrong, but what has upset you about the assistants? Like Pat, sometimes I wonder. Pat goes into the assistants, like how much can you actually know about how good the assistant coaches are? We never hear them talk. We're never at practice. I mean, I go to a very rare practice. Like, I just think that's one of those things. You think Griff is late? I mean, I think Griff is recruited pretty darn well. Yeah, I guess maybe I'm not doing it right or something. I don't know. Because I did it from the website. Is that what we know? Yeah. I doubt we'll even. I mean, Scooter and Pat were probably the two callers, but we'll need it for post game. So. Good thinking. Yeah. Oh, you're not even on. Sorry.
It's all right. That was a pretty cold line I just had. But no one will ever know. Govendo, you're dead to me. I saw you donate or contribute like 3,000 points to that vote.
Yeah, Griff's no longer with the bigs, right?
Yeah, that's what he said.
Govendo. I saw the everyone was just like, we saw your kick or whatever. Yeah, it's Dan Engelstad with the bigs.
I think it was CBW asked for the fire mic was. I couldn't fit it. I tried. I even had to rewrite that answer. It was supposed to be like, dude, come on. We all saw the kick.
I should get into coaching. I don't know if you want that. You wouldn't have much of a life if you're a coach.
I'm telling you, dude, weatherman is way better job. You can never be right as a weatherman and still have a career.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, weatherman is also not the easiest job ever. Like,
well, I mean, it seems to be pretty easy. I feel like the idea is hard.
A lot of these people, it's like it's the same deal as like broadcast. Like you're a broadcaster, you're getting up and talking in front of a lot of people. That's some of these people
but in
the
our line of work, we actually have to have facts to back it up, dude. They can just be like, it's supposed to get
Sometimes.
6 inches a day, man. Oh, we didn't get 6 inches? My bad. It happens. What do you want me to do? Control the weather?
The poll results were a lot of people thinking Mike has no chance, Supercat, I think.
On scoring?
Shocking. Yeah.
Nah, I got a very surprising 3-point shot. Surprisingly, sometimes it goes in.
It'll get you off. Right?
Yeah. I'm a microwave shooter.
Paulie's
Underwhelming.
rarely right and still around, yeah. Well, Paulie would have to fire himself from the show, right?
I wanted to fire Paulie yesterday. Did you hear me yell at him?
Yes. What was it? It was like
Today's business.
Yeah,
about the MVP?
and then the
I don't remember
anthem in 2
Oh,
languages.
yeah.
Yeah. We're coming back. I was laughing at that. Sunny 102 full time, yeah. He'd probably like that more. He doesn't even talk sports on the sports shows, right?
This is the Burdick Ford and Burdick Toyota pregame show.
Almost tip time inside the dome, about 15 minutes or so. Tim Leonard back with you on our pregame show. We'll have full post-game coverage as well on ESPN Radio Syracuse, CuseSportsTalk.com. Immediately after the final buzzer, hop back on with us for post-game. You can catch Adrian Autry's full post-game press conference live as well. Let's hit this day in SU basketball history, brought to you by the Shep Family Funeral Home. Celebrate your loved one with help from Shep Family Funeral Home. Visit shepfamily.com. SCHEPP. family.com. So Syracuse owns the series history against Wake Forest, a lead of 11-4. Last year did not go well. That was the game where Benny Williams was not happy afterwards. 99-70. It was one of many blowout losses, maybe the worst at Wake Forest last year on February 3rd, 99-70. Wake beat Syracuse. Wake just missed out on the tournament last year because they didn't win any games outside of Winston-Salem, and they have never won in the JMA Wireless Dome. Wake Forest 0-6 all time at the Dome. So that is your This Day in SU basketball history, brought to you by the Shep Family Funeral Home. How about the injury report, brought to you by Harding and Mazzotti. J.J. Starling is really the only guy we have to talk about on the injury report. As far as we know, Eddie Lampkin's back seems to be good. That seems to be less of a concern than it was 2-3 weeks ago. Red did say after the Bucknell game that things are trending up for JJ. He seems like he's doing well. I was at practice the day before the Bucknell game. JJ was out there doing some stuff, like shooting a little bit. He was running up and down. It was a funny moment actually during practice where Red, anytime someone misses a layup at some point during practice, I think it's a layup, you have to run what are called 11s, which is basically get up and down the floor in 11 seconds. It's like wind sprints, which is pretty typical for a lot of coaches. And Red looked over at JJ and was like, why aren't you doing the 11? Like, just because your wrist or your hand hurts, your hand more specifically, why aren't you running the 11s? So he was still doing some of that. He's got a different cast there, and he's able to shoot a little bit. It's not his non-shooting hand. So he was doing some stuff during practice. It seems like that is trending, but Red did say he's not a doctor, so the doctors think he's still got a little bit more of a ways to go than maybe Red thinks. So good news is the Orange schedule is pretty easy to start ACC play. Then it gets a lot tougher after the first 6 games here in a row. After that, it's like 5 games that they're projected to lose in a row. So maybe you get JJ back, I don't know, 4 or 5 games from now, and you have him for those tough games, which you could certainly use flipping some games you're projected to lose into win. So that's the Harding and Mazzotti injury report. We'll give you our keys to the game and a prediction as we return on QSportsTalk.com and ESPN Radio.
Today, the Orange and
Oh, nice, Dom. No wrap on the hand today? Cool. That's good. 6 weeks on the 14th. Yeah. I think he's, I don't know. From what I saw in practice, guess maybe a week and a half away. I mean, he took shots and then he kind of iced his hand he sort of like practiced a decent amount throughout like the warm-up session of practice. And then once they get going into the real stuff, he wasn't out there, but yeah. The funny thing with JJ, he said that, so it's his left hand, obviously he shoots righty. He said that I always watch, like, it feels like anytime he goes to the basket from the left side, he still lays it up with his right hand. I mean, not that he has like a weak left hand, but it feels like he wants to go right. And even when he does go left, he finishes with his right hand. And then after this hand injury stuff came out, he was like, yeah, I do everything with my left. Like, he's basically ambidextrous. He drives with the left hand. He eats with the left hand. And they've been joking about that. So I don't know. Maybe I'm off on that, but it does. I don't really remember him like showcasing his left hand. Like all his floaters and stuff, it feels like it's always right-handed. The other kind of weird observation, I don't know if anyone else is with me on this, but Eddie Lampkin and he's effective down low, of course, but he never uses the backboard, it seems like. Like every close range shot is like a little teardrop off the backside of the rim and in or something. I've never really seen a guy who scores so many points in the paint hardly ever use the backboard.
Fehlman.com. That's Fehlman.com. Fehlman Brothers Automotive.
Starting 5 time. What do we got? Same starting lineup. Yeah, I mean, he's pretty effective scoring down low, but he just doesn't. Maybe there's a couple where you're like, why wouldn't he use the backboard on that one? But some guys are just very backboard heavy, you know, and he's not one of them.
Don't miss one of the best home basketball schedules in years, featuring exciting matchups against Cuse, North Carolina, NC State, and Virginia. Experience all the action at the newly renovated JMA Wireless Dome, now with upgraded chair-back seating and premium sections for an enhanced game day experience. Secure your seats today by visiting Cuse.com/tickets. Be part of the excitement of Orange Basketball.
Steve Forbes does a good job in the portal. I know Scooter was like, they must have NIL to get some guys from Gonzaga. I just can't imagine they have a ton of NIL. I mean, that probably is one of their bigger sports, obviously, for NIL, but he does a good job in the portal for a guy that they always bring in 1 or 2 guys that are pretty solid, and then they make it better. Who's that guy? Appleby, right? He was a good guard out of the portal. They've had like 2 or 3. There was a couple guys that went to the NBA.
Hi, it's Jim Boeheim, and you're listening to the Pulse of the Orange, ESPN Radio, 97.7 and 100.1.
This is the Burdick Ford and Burdick Toyota pregame show.
All right, wrapping things up on the pregame show. You can listen to the game on TK99. Flip the dial in just a little bit to TK99, ESPN 1200 on the AM dial for the Syracuse Wake Forest game. Last game of 2024. ACC play the rest of the way. Big game today between two teams that do need a win. Wake is 9-4. The Orange are 6-6. And time to make a prediction for this very important game. I'm going to say Wake wins in a relatively close game. My whole logic for this is I look at Wake Forest's roster. I just think they have a little bit more. I think they've underplayed. They haven't made shots, but it feels like they're trending up the way Hunter Salas has been playing. Some of the big keys for me from a Syracuse standpoint today, you got to limit turnovers because for whatever reason, the last 2 games, they have not done that. They were averaging about 10.5 turnovers per game in the first 10 games of the season. Then they had 21 against Maryland, and then they had 21 against Bucknell, which I know you're playing press and you're speeding up the tempo, but you can't have 21 turnovers against Bucknell. Wake is a team that does force some turnovers. They turn it over a good amount themselves, 12.5 per game. If you could win the turnover battle, that would be big. And I do think Hunter Salas is going to be Lucas Taylor, who's watching him a lot. He is a 3-level scorer. Remember Lucas Taylor, by the way, started his career at Wake Forest, so he's probably a little bit amped up for this game today. He's been playing a little bit better of late. If Lucas Taylor is truly that defender that Red Autry thinks he is, I mean, we've seen him at times. Micah Shrewsbury in the second half, he kind of lost him at points against Notre Dame. They need someone to be a lockdown defender against a guy like Salas, who is going to be one of the better players Syracuse will face in ACC play and for the rest of the season. So I'm going to say Wake Forest wins this game. We'll call it 72-64 is my official score prediction. I think Wake just has a little bit more experienced guys down the stretch. They are just a little bit more talented team right now. They have the win over Michigan. I think Hunter Salas is a level of player that Syracuse does not have. And actually, I worry more about Syracuse's offense in this game than their defense. I think it's going to be a little lower scoring than people think. Wake has had a very solid defense throughout the year, which is kind of atypical for Steve Forbes' team. So I think the Orange are going to struggle to score, especially if they're going with that Taylor and Cuff lineup a little bit more. So that would be my concern from a Syracuse standpoint. 72-64, that's my official prediction. Wake Forest over Syracuse. But flip on over to TK99 to listen to the game. We'll be back here on ESPN Radio Syracuse for the post-game show and on QSportsTalk.com. We'll be taking your calls then. So enjoy the game, and we'll talk to you right after on Q Sports Talk and ESPN Radio.
This is Orange